Hello everybody, Shinjo here, welcome back to the channel, and to Let's Talk Anime episode 68. In Let's Talk Anime, you guys give me suggestions on things that I can talk about, whether it's fully anime related, based off of anime, anything of the sort. So, let's begin. Today's episode is going to start with Kamen Rider Gotchard. So, I feel like I say this every single time. There is a dedicated fan base for this series that's always in my comment section. And to be quite honest, even though I have talked about maybe 3 or 4 different Kamen Riders at this point, I've never even finished one. I'm busy watching other stuff, and quite honestly, well, I'll get into that part later. So, let's start with the positives of this. First of all, I really like how the band Back On sings the opening for this show. I'm familiar with Back On just from generic songs that I've heard of theirs, and they are a really good band. Like I mentioned before, I have seen other Kamen Riders, and much like how regular animated anime do, the Kamen Rider franchise tries to go for corny dialogue or over-the-top facial expressions. You've seen them in literally any anime, I'm sure. But this one isn't really as bad. I know that's a weird way to put it, but in other Kamen Rider that I've seen, it seems like they're trying to emulate the style of anime, especially with the over-the-top facial expressions. But it wasn't really that big of an issue for me. Whether or not they actually did or not, I don't really remember. I watched it a couple of months ago, so it's not fresh in my mind. But either way, not too distracting. I will say the plot twist of Minato being involved with this whole plot was a little bit unexpected for me. I thought it was kind of weird how at the start of the show, Minato was asking Ichinose what he wants to be when he grew up. But the fact that that all kind of tied into Minato being involved with the good guy squad was actually kind of cool. Granted, if you've seen a lot of Kamen Rider, it might not be that big of a surprise, but for me it was. But unfortunately, we're moving over to the cons now. And like I mentioned at the start, I think the thing of it is, even though I've seen a lot of Kamen Rider, it's never really personally grabbed me. Like, yeah, it's definitely neat animated-wise, especially in the more recent things, but something about it isn't really grabbing me and making me watch it more consistently than I do. It may be the fact that it's real-life people rather than anime characters. It may be the way I have to go about looking for it online. Whatever the case may be, something about it just isn't really grabbing me. Now, if I get it recommended for this series, I'm still going to continue watching it, but it's not something that I feel the need to continue watching. And I feel like this is me being a broken record because I probably said something similar in the last time I discussed this, that every Kamen Rider seems to have their own gimmick of sorts. This one is gotcha, of course. Not to be confused with Jaden's catchphrase from Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. More like, I don't know, it might be something that they explain later on in the show. It just feels kind of like a loose sort of imaginary idea. Kind of like what Ash being a Pokemon Master was for the longest time in the series. It was something that's always brought up, but never really elaborated on. The whole thing of gotcha does come off a bit forced, but it's not that big of an issue. It's just getting to the point where it's a little bit overdone in my opinion, because it seems like every single one has to have a gimmick. Granted, I'm also a Pokemon fan, so gimmicks like that isn't that big of a surprise to me, but we'll get to that part later. I also wish they wouldn't have spoiled Kudo being related to the person that gave Ichinose his driver. Because I can't remember how exactly it was, and if I remember this correctly, Ichinose is the main character and Kudo's the main girl. So, she's more than likely just gonna be his love interest, if I'm going off of other anime that I watch. But if I'm not mistaken, when Ichinose mentioned that he got his driver, it showed a flashback of Kudo talking with the person that Ichinose got his driver from. So more than likely a relative of some kind, and I would have liked it if they wouldn't have spoiled it. Now, that might not actually be the case. They might throw a loop into it, but that's just what I see from it. Because I already had an idea of some kind that there was some connection, but they just flat out said it. I mean, not really, but you get my point. But overall, a good show for the episodes that I've seen, but like I mentioned before, nothing personally worth it to keep me invested in the show. Speaking of not being invested in the show, up next is Reign of the Seven Spellblades. So, I saw that this was recommended to me in my comment section, and I went to find it. I can't remember if it was directly written as the English name or from the translated, but regardless, I looked it up before I watched it, of course, and I was surprised to find out that it was this year. I didn't actually know it was. I might have skipped over it when I did a seasonal review, or I might have just forgot about it. And well, I can kind of see why. That sounds kind of rough. Let's do it a little bit differently today. So let's start with the negatives. So, in our main cast, at least from what I've seen so far, we have Oliver, Pete, Guy, Nanao, Katie, and Sheila. Now, you may be wondering, that's a lot of characters. You're right. Quite honestly, I don't even care about half of them. This is going to be me being a bit harsh for a minute. So, Oliver is supposed to be the main character, but he's as bland as cardboard. Another black-haired male protagonist. Never seen that one before. From what I've seen so far, he's got little hints of personality, but it's just something that I don't really care about. And then Pete and Guy. Guy is the dude on the very far left, and he's just the sort of generic protagonist that's always happy, always upbeat. Pete is the bookworm, and I don't really care about either one of them because they basically just boil down to one personality trait and that's it. And then we have Sheila. I believe Sheila is the one on the far right, the one that comes from a royal family or some kind. That's really cool. I like her personality, and I like her standing up to that bully in the first 3 episodes that was ready to fight Nanao. Katie's honestly one that I liked at first, but she's kind of dipping into the don't care tier. I still like her design, and I like her sort of arc that's been established in the first 3 episodes with her caring for animals and stuff. But she's feeling like a damsel in distress, in my opinion. Might change, but that's what I'm seeing so far. And then we have Nanao. And that is where I'm going to transition into my pros, because I really like Nanao. She's honestly my favorite character in this show. But of course, like you've seen, the bar isn't really set too high, in my opinion. Nanao's the generic Genki sort of character, but she has real cool moments of beating the crap out of people, and I really like that. Another thing that I like is it's really cool that it's a fantasy-based setting that's not an isekai. I know, everybody always clowns on isekai, but it gets to the point where it feels overbearing at some points. I might even make a video separate to this, but it feels like anymore there have to be 3 isekai each season. And if it gets to the point where people roll their eyes when they see it, that might be a sign that it's an overdone trend. This show is just trying to be overly serious and overly edgy for no apparent reason. It might be just me, but I prefer things that make me laugh rather than things that are serious. Of course, there are exceptions, but most of the time, I do like to laugh. Anyway, that's all I have to say about this show. So let's move on to the last thing in the video, the Teal Mask DLC. Don't mind me trying to fix this up a little bit. There we go. So, there's a funny story with this. I had another topic to discuss. I'm saving it for the next video. You'll find out why next video. I was trying to figure out what I could discuss. And then I remembered this DLC came out. I honestly wasn't planning on discussing it, but I got a little bit of time that I can discuss it here. So, there's a bit of a story with this. So, I obviously played this part. I was gonna wait till the second DLC came out, which, funny enough on that, today they revealed that it's going to be out December 14th. So, I couldn't have picked a better day to record this. Obviously, if you played any sort of Pokemon games and you played the Sword and Shield DLC expansion pass, you know the general idea of this. There's an extra part of the content for the game. I know, money issues, whatever. But I'm really only talking about the contents of the game itself. So, let's get started. First of all, one of the big draws for the Teal mask is the new Pokemon and the returning Pokemon. For the new Pokemon, I believe... Oh, before I forget, there are going to be spoilers in this. Obviously, there's spoilers in everything that I discussed, but just to give an idea. So, there are a good chunk of new Pokemon in the game. Off the top of my head, we have Ogerpon, Pheasantipity, Munkidori, Okidogi, Diplin, Ursaluna, even though he's technically not new, and I think that's it. I think he only got one evolution, because I know Duraludon's evolution is in the next game. Yeah, I think that's everything. If there's something I forgot, then I guess it's just not important enough to remember. Also, we have returning Pokemon, and I, for one, am happy to see the Bug Army rise up. I'm channeling my inner A drive, and I am so happy Rabombi and Yanma are back in the game. I really love those two Pokemon. They are maybe one of my top 5 of their respective gens in general. I really like Rabombi, a fast, speedy special attacker. Yanma, a bit underwhelming before it evolves, but regardless. But I'm really happy for that. And on top of the fact that I already beat the base Scarlet and Violet game, so I got the shiny charm so I can just run around the Teal mask and get shinies, I actually caught a shiny Yanma, just by complete accident. Really happy for that. As far as the new Pokemon, at first when I saw all of them, I didn't really care for any of them. I would say from the Loyal 3, my favorite was probably Okidogi and then Munkidori. And that was before I even saw their types. I really like the 3 types of those 3. The new Ursaluna is just amazing. Diplin, I know people hype up Diplin. I don't really care one way or the other. But Ogerpon. Ogerpon is amazing. The story probably helped with that. Let's talk about the story. I really like the story. It's a bit bare bones and kind of a simplistic sort of story where you just run around, beat the legendaries, get masks, read billboards, you know, usual thing that you do on vacation. I didn't really care for Carmine at first, but I really enjoyed her development by the end. It's a situation where, not to the same degree, but of characters like Silver, where she's kind of a mean sort of rival, but not in the typical way that you expect. It's kind of funny because with the 2 new characters that were revealed, well, let me say Kieran and Carmine. Obviously, Perrin's there as well. Perrin's just in a whole tier by herself because I really like that design for obvious reasons. But it's funny because I didn't care for Carmine at first, but Kieran was fine. By the end of the story, that completely swapped. Obviously, with the... What's it called next? I can't think of what the next DLC is off the top of my head. Next DLC that comes out. That might have a full story on Kieran. So obviously I'm going to try and get this out before the DLC comes out. And who knows, I might even discuss the next DLC in a future video. I've gushed enough about the DLC. Let's talk about things that I didn't like. So, let's get this out of the way. frame issues, the giant crystal pond thing. There are frame issues there. I know, we've heard it all before. Personally, I don't really care about it that much, so I'm just bringing it up just to appease people. I personally don't care. But talking about the story again, I don't really like how we lied to Kieran about Ogre Pond. Because all of this would have been avoided if we were just honest. And I don't like how they gave us a choice with that, but all the choices sucked. I don't know. I'm sure there's some sort of reasoning behind it, like Kieran's a bit fragile, so he might break down and cry or something. I don't know. But I just don't like how we were basically forced to lie to Kieran. But overall, I can't really say much about the characters in general, or even the Pokemon, how competitive they'll be. Obviously, they're going to be because most of them are legendaries. Although I never really thought about this. Are the Loyal 3 considered legendaries? Never really thought about it before. But a lot of the stuff I discuss here may be cleared up in the next DLC. So, I don't know. Maybe everything will be fixed by the Indigo Disc. Huh? See? I finally remembered it. It just took a little bit of time. But that is going to be today's video over and done with. If you enjoy, hit that like button down below. Subscribe if you haven't. If you have any recommendations for Let's Talk Anime, leave them down in the comment section. I'll get to them when I get to them. But until next time, Momentai.